help you with this, Alan. Slide it over.
Cool off over there.
You good to go?
You're all set?
Okay.
Maplewood Planning Commission meeting for the Tuesday, September 19th, 2023 will come to order. Roll call.
Lou Yang, present.
Don, present.
Tushar Desai present.
Alan Egan, present.
John Eads, present.
All right. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Staff, is there any changes from the staff?
No changes to the agenda.
Members, any changes, recommendations? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Fred moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Lou seconds. All in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
No ayes. Motion moved. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Any changes from members or staff?
I don't see anything.
Any,
Question about the minutes, the struck items in the minutes, were those, so was I can't remember if the agenda was changed, if the minute meetings were revised?
I think it's the documents that got revised.
I've just never seen our minutes with the striked
Chair and Commission,
literature before.
Chair and Commission, just to confirm, are you talking about on page?
Pages like D1?
Starting on 3 and 4, under the conditions there?
Yes.
So that is specific to if you read the motion there, the council hereby approves the resolution. It's the underline and the strike through have to do with additions and deletions to those conditions that were initially recommended. So the strike through were deleted and the underline were added.
Right, so what we changed in regards to
Correct.
the initial.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
any other questions? None? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Alan makes the motion. Second.
Second. Lou.
Lou is second. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented?
Aye.
Any noes? No noes. Approval of minutes is put in. Next item on the agenda is public hearing. Number 1 is Snake Discovery, 831 Century Avenue North, conditional use permit amendment resolution and a zoning map amendment ordinance. Staff, report please.
Okay, so good evening, Chair and Commission. As mentioned, Snake Discovery is here this evening. They operate an indoor educational zoo and retail store that features reptiles and amphibians located at 831 Century Avenue North. The site is just over an acre in size, and tonight they are requesting approval for a conditional use permit amendment. As part of this application before you tonight, staff has initiated a rezoning of a portion of the property. This eliminates a zoning and land use inconsistency, and we'll further detail that here. So the current controls of the property, the future land use in our comprehensive plan guides the property for mixed-use neighborhood. And that guidance allows for commercial retail or service businesses, offices, and medium to high density housing with up to between 8 to 31 units per acre. The proposed conditional use permit amendment related to the existing commercial retail business on the property and the rezoning of the western portion of the property to commercial meets the intent of the comprehensive plan. The site has 2 zoning districts overlaid on it currently. Historically, it's been used for commercial uses, It was previously zoned and guided in the comprehensive plan for low-density residential. In 1988, the city council approved re-guiding the land use to commercial and rezoning the east portion to commercial where the building is located, while keeping the parking lot as residential, zoned residential. And that's reflected on this map. You can see how the property boundaries outlined in blue. However, the western portion is yellow, indicating single dwelling, and the eastern portion of it is red, indicating business commercial. So R1 and BC. At the time of the land use guidance and zoning change, there were neighbors that were opposed to the business at the time operating there, expanding within that parking lot and behind their commercial building. So while it's part of the same property, there's no property line dividing the parking lot and the building, that the use on that parking lot was restricted to parking so that there was no outdoor storage or sales occurring within that parking lot specifically. And that was, in reading through the previous documents we have on file, in response to that opposition to any expansion of the commercial use towards the residential neighborhood. So since that 1988 change, the land was re-guided to mixed use, the entire property. So rezoning the western portion is really, where we want to formally eliminate the zoning and land use inconsistency that is present so that the property complies with the future land use designation in the city's comprehensive plan. So the reason this was initiated and brought before you tonight is Snake Discovery reached out to the city. They have requested to install one exterior light within their parking lot. The light, their reasoning and request for the light is to provide visibility, safety for staff and visitors that visit that zoo and retail store, particularly concerns with safety and winter hours getting darker early. The site has an existing CUP. As mentioned, it was for outdoor storage, sales, and display, and for the parking lot. The previous business was a garden center, many of you may know, that operated on the site for many years. The CUP was initially granted in 1971, and there were conditions and language within that CUP that were very specific to that last business or don't apply to Snake Discovery and how they utilize that site. One of those conditions in the CUP stated that there cannot be exterior lighting within that parking lot, and so that's what triggered their request to amend this conditional use permit. It also offers us the opportunity to review those conditions on the permit so that they better reflect and address the current site conditions. And in doing so, we're recommending that the previous requirements under the CUP granted in 1988 be terminated, and that previous CUP was included in your report for reference. So we've proposed new conditions. Before we go into that, here is a image of their lighting plan. This is a preliminary lighting plan that they've submitted. Right, for some reason, when I changed this to a different image, it kind of lost the exact marker on here of the light. But if you see where it says AA2, it's just right above there is where the proposed light would be. So the conditions that are before you tonight with this conditional use permit amendment, again, it would remove those previous conditions that were listed. And these are the staff proposed conditions on here. So the council will review the permit in 1 year. Outdoor sales, storage, and display are not permitted in the parking lot. These activities are allowed, however, but limited to the area underneath the canopy structure. This is on the west side of the building or at the main entrance on the east side of the building off Century Avenue. This is still allowing them to essentially utilize the site how they do. And so while they're we're not allowing them essentially to use the parking lot, so it's a similar intent of what occurred in 1988, I guess. So additional storage or display would not be permitted in that area. In addition to that, a trash enclosure is required to be built surrounding the dumpsters that are on site, and that they are to maintain the fence that currently surrounds the parking lot. And then also requiring that any exterior lighting be reviewed by staff. That's an administrative review prior to installation. The staff review and public hearing, no comments or requirements were received from staff regarding these two applications before you. The formal review by the CDRB is not required for the proposed parking lot. It's administrative. Staff did send out a public hearing notice to properties within 500 feet. There were no comments or phone calls received ahead of this meeting. The commission and council review, both items, the conditional use permit amendment and rezoning, is before you this evening, September 19th, tentatively scheduled to go to the city council on October 9th. Staff is recommending approval of the amendment and the rezoning ordinance. And I have a recommended action here on this slide, and I'll leave it right here and answer any questions that you have. I know there is a couple of folks here from Snake Discovery as well.
Any questions from the members?
The staff, the west side of that was previously zoned R1?
That's correct.
Okay. So that would be a maximum density of what? 1 unit, maybe 2?
Well, so when this was done, and it was reviewed, by our attorney ahead of this as well, and it just, the correct way to do this is to bring this to a public hearing, to go to the planning commission and to the city council. But it's not typical that you create an arbitrary line in a legal property of record and say this half can only be used for this and this half can only be used for this. So in addition to that, there's a land use and zoning inconsistency where our comprehensive plan guides us for something different. It does not guide it for low-density, single-dwelling residential. The parcel in its entirety is guided for mixed use.
Okay.
So that is why we are making the recommendation. Yes, in 1988, that was the decision that was made.
Okay.
So with the CUP being terminated, is that something that has already occurred in the staff? You folks have already terminated it.
Chair and commission, so right now, the existing conditional use permit stands, that is in place. It is recorded against the property. So if this, goes to the city council, they approve this amendment to the conditional use permit, that first condition on there that the previous conditions are terminated would remove the prior conditions on that permit. And then the conditions that we went through would be the new conditions for this business or for this property, unless there were amendments down the road for anything.
Okay.
When this is recorded, that's when the other one would be, or when it's approved and recorded, that's when the other one would not be in effect.
And with the lighting not going to design review board, somebody amongst the staff is deciding if that lighting is appropriate and does not disturb the neighborhood or anything like that.
Chair and commission, that's correct. We have lighting standards in our ordinance for the light spread at property lines adjacent to residential, and we would ensure that whatever is proposed, whether it's this or anything down the road, generally, if a commercial property wants to install a light, they do not have to come to the planning commission or the city council. They submit a lighting plan, certainly, to make sure that it complies with ordinance requirements for lighting. We have requirements that, lights be downcast, that they can't shine onto adjacent properties, and we will review that to ensure that it does before it's installed.
Okay. Any other questions before I open it up? No?
They were asking if they have a right to speak, and it's a public hearing, so when they open it up, yes.
This is a public hearing, so we will call anybody who wishes to come and talk at that point. Right now, we are just gonna start to open it up. So we are gonna open up the public hearing, and first of all, we'd like to hear from the Snake Discovery. Who is representing Snake Discovery? You could give your name and sign your name. Is there a write-up?
Let me grab this here for him. So just, your name. and address. Yes, if you could just put your name and then address.
Address or this address? So,
In,
You can give your business address,
in
that's
this
fine.
situation, your business address is fine.
all right, my name is Emily Roberts, and my husband Ed and I own Snake Discovery. We are, as Elizabeth explained, we're an educational facility, an indoor zoo. We're a reptile store as well. And we have on the west side of our property, which is what we're proposing to have rezoned, what we're discussing tonight is our main parking lot, and that is where our dumpster, our garbage and recycling bins are, and it's where our customers park. And the issue that's been coming up every year so far is during the winter months, especially when the sun goes down, there's no lighting around anywhere. The fence around our parking lot essentially blocks off any lighting, and it's pretty pitch black down there, back there. So we're hoping to install a light just for the safety of both our customers and for the safety of our staff members bringing out trash at the end of the night, because we don't want our customers to slip and fall, especially during the icy winters, because you can't see anything. We often just turn on our headlights on our cars so that we can illuminate the parking lot while we bring out garbage, but there's no way to see much otherwise. So we're just hoping to get lights installed so that we can see.
Okay. Any questions for Emily? None? All right, thank you much.
Great, thank you.
We'll open it up for if anyone else wishes to speak regarding the Snake Discovery hearing today.
My name is Chu Tran.
Can you please sign in first and put your address, please?
My name is Rob Stinger. I live right next to Snake Discovery at 814 Mayhill Road, North, Maplewood.
So are we here, are they asking for commercial zoning? Is that they're requesting a new, instead of having a residential zoning parking lot? Is that what they're trying to do now?
Go ahead.
Chair, Commission, and guests here this evening. So the request that was made by the applicant was to amend the conditional use permit. There is a specific condition on their permit that says there can be no exterior lights in their parking lot. They are making a request to revise the permit to allow for an exterior light in their parking lot. Staff, city staff, is initiating to formally rezone the western kind of arbitrarily portion of the property to align with the rest of the property, so that it also complies with the future land use guidance for that parcel.
Okay, well, what we believe is that zoning has already been won through Superior Court, that is only supposed to be made residential parking and not to be commercial parking.
The only thing that's supposed to be commercial is that building.
Is the
The rest
building.
of the land is residential. They have a special use permit for parking. Now, in the special use permit, there's several guidelines that they have to obey, which says no light,
The
no
garbage.
intercom.
The garbage is not enclosed.
The garbage is not enclosed, but in the past, the garbage is supposed to be next to the building. That's why Daggy, the previous owner, built it, so the garbage would be right next to a shed that's right next to the building. So there's supposed to be no advertising or displayments on the residential property.
Which,
There is displayment of advertisement on the residential property. If they want their advertisement, it has to be on the building, which is commercial, not in a residential lot.
and I believe when Deggy sold the.
So when
the
Deggy
business,
sold the
it was
business,
sold, or if it went out of business, or whatever, all the conditional use permits were not to be forwarded to the new,
it goes to the land, not the new owner.
go to the land, not to the new owner.
So also that basically they no longer can park on Mayhill or 7th Street. They lost that 28 parking spots as it happened to switch hands to a new ownership.
We
So
have all of our,
we have all this documentation that when we got the house, this was all here. Never thought this issue would come up, but it has. We read through it, we highlighted stuff. We have court papers that it went through,
we
and
passed
even the court system
through the
said no.
Supreme Court to hire justice, yeah. So
So-
it's already gone to the Supreme Court already.
Us, the neighborhood of Mayhill, don't want it to go commercial,
No.
and we want to get an explanation on the 5-foot candle light.
No. If they want a light, why do they want it commercial?
So we've been hearing that they've been trying to buy out other businesses, and that kind of makes sense why they want to go commercial, because then they can gain more parking and expand their business, which I think right now, what they're doing is too big for that area.
We just want it residential. We're keeping as much as that land of the parking lot to be residential, so we don't have to worry about commercial.
Because there's housing there. You're not gonna kick out the people that live there,
Well, that's another story on it.
you know, if you wanna buy out the whole complex and rebuild.
We can give you copies of all of our,
I mean, we're willing to work with them.
to get lighting
We're
in
not
there.
going to shut them down, but the neighborhood does not want a 5-foot candle light, which
And we do not want commercial zoning.
we do not want commercial. And if they have a 5-foot candle light, it's not even gonna light up where their trash is. So their trash from the past is supposed to be next to the building. It's supposed to be next to the commercial building, because it's commercial.
And like you said, it was supposed to be enclosed, right?
It's supposed to be enclosed.
And it had,
That is correct, and we're requiring that they build an enclosure around their dumpsters.
So I don't know what the rules are for the dumpster, if it's able to be on the location that it's at, or if it needs to be next to the building.
because it's a
Be-
residential, you think the garbage should be under the commercial land next to the building.
So, like we said, we have paperwork here from
Back in 1971 to 1988.
1971, when it was called a village. And it was an HOA back then. So everybody had to go, you know, it even states that the building's not supposed to change color, it's supposed to be green. So we don't care about that, you know, they did a
Yeah.
good job on the
Yeah, it
color.
looks nice.
It looks nice, it cleaned up the area, but we do not want it to go commercial. Nor a 5-foot candle light. We don't know what that is. I mean, is that a freeway light? Is that a 5-foot light that has a globe on it?
I mean, we do want to allow them to have some kind of lighting for their parking lot if they want to feel safe, but we're not.
We're not shutting them down, so,
We're opposed against the commercial zoning though.
Okay.
So if they can explain to us about a 5-foot candlelight, what that is that a tennis court light, is that a freeway light, or is that something that stands up 5 feet tall, has a globe to the lighting area?
Okay.
I think it's 5-foot candles is what they mean by that, but they
Right,
can,
so-
the city's lighting expert can explain that to you more probably. I don't know what
Because
it
it
would
doesn't
be.
state in the letter, it just says a 5-foot
Yeah.
candlelight, so I tried to research a 5-foot candlelight, I'm coming up with freeway lights and tennis ball court lights.
If
So,
it doesn't affect other,
You
our
know.
neighborhood, we're fine. If it's not gonna go over to the other area of like, you know, where windows or through houses or whatever.
so with the special use permit, I don't know if you guys have a copy of that, it states what that property is supposed to be maintained at. Any dead trees are supposed to be removed and regrown. So if any dead trees are in that facility, they need to be taken down and replanted or removed, you know, to clean it up. Can't just have a dead tree in the lot, which there is a dead tree right now in the lot. So sooner or later, that's gonna fall down, and we don't know which direction it's gonna go in.
And there should be a no left turn sign so they don't turn to a residential,
We've been getting a lot of
Street.
traffic down May
and they
Hill
don't,
when
they
they
don't
have
have
their
that left turn
events.
sign that's supposed to be out there as you come in and out. That's always been there even before Decky.
So when they have their big events, we always get people flying down our street. Well, we have kids, everybody in the neighborhood
Or
has
they park
kids.
in front of our driveways and we can't get out.
And we're worried about our kids getting hit, you know, because the way these people are parking up and down our street, you can't see. You know, May Hill does not have a stop sign at 7th Street.
No, don't.
It's flat around the corner. Well, I think it would be appropriate to have a stop sign there, because we get a lot of cars flying around the corner. Now, what happens if it hits our kid, you know? That's a road that we don't wanna go down.
We have a lot of
Go
kids in the
ahead.
neighborhood
You have a
now.
question?
No, I just want to comment on the question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want you to know that, yeah, there are ordinances that guide between residential and commercial. And for this motion, the city will look at that. All your complaints will be taken care of by the city to make sure that they are in compliance. Okay, even the lighting and all that stuff, yeah, they are all going to be checked and balanced to make sure that they are in compliance. Okay?
But my other recommendation is some of the items that you are bringing up regarding the old CUP and the terms and conditions that were in there. Today, the Planning Commission cannot handle or address any of those issues that you have. My suggestion would have been that when you got a note, if you were within 500 feet of the business, you should have received a letter from the city that this is going to go down. That would have been the right time to contact somebody within the city
We didn't know,
to,
we thought we just had it come and show up. It's the first time
Oh.
we ever had this thing. We've never,
so that letter just said show up. It didn't say, please let us know if you have any issues, because past practice has always been, people are being encouraged to
did it say anything?
write in or call in.
Do you know, John, what it said?
All of our public hearing notices invite people to either provide comments in writing or provide a phone number, email, or attend the public hearing,
It's the same paper.
and/or.
Yep,
So,
good. So you're here.
And to answer the question on the lighting, the word foot candle, that's, and I'm not a lighting expert, but I can look at a plan and see what it shows for a measurement at a property line and throughout a site and see what it states versus what the ordinance says.
Yes.
But a foot candle is a measurement of lighting.
so
And so what do we do if we want to?
And the final, whatever is ultimately occurs for lighting, again, would be reviewed by staff. It would need to meet ordinance requirements. It would not be able to, the light spread would not go onto an adjacent property.
Okay. And then, so what about the zoning then? How do we go about, if you are going to try to make it commercial,
Yeah.
does this still stand up in the law justice set? We fought it back then through the Supreme Court to make it residential and not commercial?
Well, like was indicated, you know, when you had that letter, I mean, you should have cited that to, I mean, as a comment before today. So that would have been taken into consideration. Maybe they should have get some paperwork from you that you are alluding to, you know. But right now, you know, this is what we have.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And
well,
Elizabeth, did you not mention earlier that this has also been passed through legal in the
That is-
city?
Chair and Commission, everyone here this evening, yes, our city attorney has reviewed this. There is certainly documents in the file regarding this. There was a lot of back and forth between the neighborhood, between the previous owner and business, the garden center that operated there. There was also a lot of documentation between the owner and the city. And yes, there were legal actions that occurred. But it was the, I guess, recommendation to bring this forward in this manner.
Right.
Okay.
And so,
So where does that stand with us? So does it mean that we need to get a lawyer now?
we didn't understand. Can you explain again?
So so now if we're gonna try to fight this commercial and this residential zoning thing, does that mean that we need to hire an attorney too as well?
We can't advise you what your process is going to be on what you wish to do. That is something that you folks need to decide. We are just explaining to you what is on the docket here today to talk about and what we are moving forward with. We hear you, we understand what you are trying to say, but
So you are gonna go forward with commercial zoning, is that what
We-
you're trying to tell us?
We have to
no.
vote on that.
We have
yeah.
to vote on it. So we will be voting on it after the public hearing has closed. So that's coming up yet, but at the present time, we are making it an open forum for those who wish to have their comments passed on to us, that it is going to be recorded. So when this motion, if it passes through us, goes to City Council will also be taking it up and reviewing all the information that would be available to them before they make the final decision. Planning Commission does not make the final decision on what's going to happen. We just make a recommendation to the City Council.
So then after this, are we able to send any information to this, no, to this? thing after the hearing
If you
today?
want to provide formal, like, written comments that would be included in a staff report that would go to the city council, you certainly can send them to me.
Petition?
The petition for it?
What was that?
A petition for the zoning change?
Anything that you want to provide as far as a comment or, questions that you have, you can send that to me, and I can provide my contact information. It is on the public hearing notice as well.
Okay. All right.
I guess that's
Is that
all we
okay?
have. What's that?
Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay, so, yeah.
we just never been to a hearing before, so.
Yeah,
we
we've
didn't
never-
know.
That's
we've
fine.
never-
That's why we are here to
Learn
explain.
something new
No
every
problem.
day, so-
Yep.
So, sure. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding that your concern is that if this zoning is changed to commercial, that the element of that property could change dramatically next to your property because of the zoning change.
Yes.
And that this zoning change is your primary concern, not so
Keeping it
that,
safe for our
so that you
kids, our
are
neighborhood.
trying to make that the new conditional use permit that would be voided if we change this to commercial would have a lot of stipulations about what could be done at that commercial property, like it was when it was originally done way back in 1988,
Right, right.
which is what you have the documentation for, of what
I
you
don't know.
believed was true when you bought that house
Yeah,
with
and
the
that-
legal processes that you've done.
Yeah, we
And
got
then
from-
1971 too, where
We
the
got-
very first, all the way back from 71, I think is when it went to the Supreme Court.
So we got it from 1971 to 1988.
Yeah,
We have all the paperwork, all the guidelines, everything. We have conversations between lawyers. You guys may have some stuff as well.
Yeah, you should have it in your
because
file.
It did come to a hearing, and after a hearing, it went beyond, it went to court, so.
So just so you know, we, in the commission, again, are not privy to all that information.
Right,
That's the
right.
city staff's responsibility to manage all that. They just bring the subject matter to us for review and make our recommendations regarding changes that would be applicable to the city. So we hear you, but we still recommend that you send all your information over
We
to
will.
Elizabeth and then follow up with her on whatever issues that you may have.
And then when do we
Okay.
know when there's a voting again? When you vote
In
again,
the
do
city
you come
council,
out?
if you sit through it, you'll hear
We'll
pretty
hear
soon
that.
as to
Okay.
when it's going to the city council.
All right, perfect.
Okay?
Thank
All right,
you.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward and speak? Come on over, please. If you could sign your name down there and then give your name and address,
Okay,
please.
great. My name is Greg Krauscher. I'm from Total Lighting. I'm the person who recommended this, along with the lighting manufacturer who produced this light. I just want to add a little technical information, so thank you, board members, for listening to this. But this particular light is what's called a full cutoff light. And a full cutoff light has a rating of what they call bug rating, which means backlighting, upward lighting, and glare. And it's at the lowest level that's possible. Okay, those are numbers, you know, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, depends on how much uplight you've got. And we recommended this because of the residential area, and the company that produces this does this all over the country. And it's the kind of light that directs the light downward this way, not this way. The lower cost ones and the ones that aren't full cutoff, they just shoot light all over. So you don't know where it's gonna go. So you could be across the street and looking at a really, really strong glare. But this light is not designed to do that. And also, the pattern, we can control the pattern, and we decided that the pattern would be more of a pattern that's more like, kind of something like, it's like a triangle, something in that range. So it wouldn't shoot out, but it would go to the side. So the people that are nearby really don't have to worry about glare and excess light, because in almost every specification, whether it's a state or city of Bloomington, the number of 0.5 foot candles is a very low number. It's very, 0.5. You can't read a newspaper under 0.5. You can just barely put a key in a lock and see where it is. So it's a very low number. The lighting you have in here is probably in the range of about 35 or so. So 0.5 is very, very dim. So if you were out on a street light, underneath the street light, you'd probably be seeing 6, 7, 8 foot candles, and if you got 40 feet away, you'd probably be at probably 0.5. So it's a very low level. So, Okay. And if you look at this particular, what they call it, a photometric plan, they take and put in the dimensions of it and of the area, and then what the computer came up with as where you're gonna get your light, you know, how much light at every point throughout this whole grid. And when we get to the very edge, we're down 0.3, 0.4. In fact, 0.5 is really towards the end of the cars. So if you have your car, you know, right at the very edge, you're gonna have a tough time finding that key slot. You know, you have to look a little bit. So, you know, if I was in the neighborhood, I wouldn't worry about the glare or the amount of light. So you're gonna get your most amount of light right underneath that.
So you are specifying that it is 0.5 candles and not
0.5,
5?
yes.
Okay, there's a big difference
Yes.
between 5 and 0.5. So
Right.
that's why I wanted
So
to
like I said,
clarify it.
we're probably looking at 30 here, something in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
range. But,
Makes
but
sense.
0.5 is Thank you. quite dim.
Yep.
And underneath it here, you're looking at numbers like, you know, I can't see exactly, but if you look here, it's 2.3, 2.4, so it's not terribly strong, right? And so if there's any questions, I'll take those now, but thank you for your time.
Yep, and thanks for
appreciate it.
clarifying it.
Okay.
Thank you
Yeah.
much.
Great.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to come in and speak?
I actually forgot to say something.
You can come up again if you want to.
My neighbors did say that they also.
Can you come please closer to the microphone so we can record it out?
Yeah, I had gotten a message from my neighbor because they're sick right now and they couldn't show up. And they are also against zoning change as well. do you want me to put their name and address down too?
No, the information that you will send to Elizabeth,
to her,
you
too?
can send all that information to
Okay.
her.
All right,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I
Yep,
was supposed to say that
sure.
or not. I just forgot. to
Yep,
say that
nope,
down.
thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? If you can please sign your name in.
My name's Joe Cagle. I live at 2677 7th Street East. So it's on the, 7th Street is the adjacent street. I live down on the end, right next to the Nature Center. I guess my main reason for being here tonight is that I've heard some talk about this in the neighborhood lately, and I'm trying to get more information or understanding as to why it would need to be rezoned. I don't understand why for all these years it's been just fine. And now all of a sudden, 40 plus, whatever years it is later, the city is proposing to rezone it. What's changed in the mentality of the city, or why has it been good for previous businesses and now all of a sudden it's not good anymore?
Okay,
Is
we can
there
ask staff.
Specific explanation that you gave again, if you could, please?
Yeah, Chair and Commission, everyone here this evening. The property itself has always been used for a commercial use. It was incorrectly zoned and guided for low-density residential historically. And then at the time, there was a conditional use permit that was granted to the business in 1971. That was that's how the land use was guided. It was guided residential, it was zoned commercial, or zoned residential. It was changed in 1988 based on the owner wanting to build a garage in their parking lot. I think that's what the court, documents that were referenced are. But at the end of the day, what we're looking at is a situation where we had a commercial building that was actually incorrectly zoned and guided from a land use perspective. And we had a council previously who said, let's change the building, or half of this property to commercial, and re-guide the whole thing as commercial. It was re-guided to commercial at one time as well, prior to being re-guided as mixed use. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to say whether or not that was right or wrong, but it's certainly not common to do that. And so at this point, it's really just solving for an inconsistency that we have with zoning and land use. There's a comprehensive plan that guides future land use throughout the whole city. And this property is not guided for low-density residential, and it has not been since, I forget the exact date, there's a lot of dates in here, but since the 80s. So it's been guided commercial. However, this zoning has remained. And so this is really a formal process to rezone the western portion, the parking lot, back to commercial,
And
if that makes sense.
Along with this, if the rezoning does go through, is there a conditional use permit stipulations and stuff that would prevent that, like from changing it and doing a bunch of things that would deteriorate the surrounding neighborhood?
Staff has recommended conditions that we believe will help, minimize any impact to the surrounding neighborhood. I can't speak to a hypothetical situation of what could occur. I don't know. Certainly there could be different proposals down the road by this property owner or a different property owner. The CUP, the conditions that we're recommending, we've outlined those. The Planning Commission can make a recommendation of additional conditions or change those conditions, as can the City Council. If you had something specific that you wanted to bring up, you could do that. But I hope that answers your question.
Well, I'm just trying to understand these things, basically. I'm not really, my only problem really with this business in general, and it would probably be with any business that's too big for the property that they're on, is that all their overflow parking really congests the neighborhood and the street. There's only one side parking on the street. I have a hard time getting in and out of my driveway while I'm pulling a trailer every weekend. Maybe it's not every weekend, I'm not sure, but they have a lot of events, and it really congests the neighborhood already. So if they were to expand their business or whatever, which I'm not saying they're trying to do, but I'm trying to make sure I understand what's going on and know, just educate myself, I guess, and speak my mind to you guys. I mean, I'm not against any kind of business or whatever that's good for the community or whatever, and I'm not saying they're not good for the community, but I'd also like you guys to know that it has congested the neighborhood adjacent to the business already. And I'm just trying to speak to that and understand, because it was my understanding that they can't put a light there, and this has all been brought up because they want to put a parking lot light in there, and they can't do that with a residential zone.
The way their existing permit, so the site has this existing conditional use permit, and there is a condition on there that was placed by the council that says, no, there can't be exterior lighting within the parking lot. So it explicitly states that, and so that's why they are here. They're, asking for that condition to be amended to allow them to have a parking lot light.
So can I offer a suggestion that we amend the CUP to allow a lot light and leave it zoned the way it is, the way it's worked for the last 50-plus years? I'll sit down after that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak about this subject? If you could sign your name in, please.
My name is Chris Stanger. I live on 2703 7th Street East. I just agree with everything that Joe said. I don't understand why we can't just put a light in and leave it zoned residential for all the same reasons he already mentioned. I don't really need to take up any more time, but I believe in everything he said.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One last chance, anybody who wishes to speak, otherwise I'm closing the public hearing. All right, 1, 2, 3, gone. I'm closing the public hearing on snake discovery. Commission members, any comments, questions, anything that we need clarification on? No.
Well, I think that we need, Elizabeth, I think if the condition, persists or suffice, I'm pretty sure that the request for parking will go with the square footage of the rezoning being a commercial.
I do not, I guess, are you asking if they would be required to park within their parking lot, being a commercial business
No, what I'm
versus?
saying is that the square footage, if it goes from residential, to a business, the square footage of that business will require a certain number of parking difference between commercial and residential.
So it's a commercial business operating on that site, and there's always been a commercial parking lot there. It's just that it was previously zoned residential and guided for residential, incorrectly so, at that time. And so the existing parking lot that is there is for that commercial business. It's not a residential parking lot. It's zoned residential currently on our zoning map. It's sort of a confusing one, but it's a commercial parking lot.
But I think part of the question, if I'm not mistaken, what Alan is asking is the process that we are trying to do here is very logical and the right approach based on what I have seen and done over the years here.
Yes, sir.
But the question is, what is the limitation for parking for this business? like, as you're mentioning, there is parking already provided for the customers that come in the door. Now, for the type of business that is in its place and the number of customers that they see, is the potential to revisit the parking requirement for that particular business?
Chair and Commission, that's a good question. We certainly can look to see how many stalls they have on the site. Generally, what occurs when you have an existing commercial business, this site or any site, and a new business goes in, provided that we are aware, and it's reviewed by the city or the question is posed, we will let them know what types of requirements need to be achieved. So if a use changes from a lower intensity use that would maybe not require as much parking to a higher intensity use that would require more parking, we would then tell them you need to provide so many stalls for that use. In this case, I'm not exactly sure when this business began operating on this site. It's also a question of, does city staff have, that.
The staffing to do all that kind of
The
work.
staffing to, and also kind of the, I guess, right to go around and say, when did you start operating here? You need more parking. I think it's fair to say that a business shouldn't be, if it's a usual occurrence, that they shouldn't be having people park on, adjacent residential streets. Commercial streets are certainly different. I think that's a fair thing to maybe have a discussion regarding. We certainly can look at how many parking stalls they have on site and see what that would look like compared to our current ordinance.
Yes.
Parking has not been, at least has not been brought up to staff as far as that being a concern. We could maybe ask the applicant if they've experienced that with their customers coming there, if they experience a difficulty in finding parking on their site. Or maybe they have an accurate amount or count of how many parking stalls are there.
So as we move forward to make the motion to approve the existing two items in question here, it's not addressing the parking, so I don't think it's great to put it in as part of this amendment here, but is there,
Excuse me, it can be added to the first motion. It said, subject to certain conditions approval.
So
So the parking requirements can be added to that.
yep.
Yep.
Are you okay with that? We are looking at doing that. Because I heard enough here from the folks that are in here that it's a common issue. So I think it should be revisited at that point.
In looking at, and it might be beneficial to look at the aerial again. You certainly could do that, to answer your question, yes.
Yep.
In looking at the aerial, there certainly is additional space that is within the property boundaries that is currently green space. I don't know, factoring in setbacks exactly, if they would be able to add a lot to their parking lot, but there certainly is a possibility that they could remove some of the trees and push their landscaping and replant landscaping to add more parking if that was a desire. You can see a little bit on here anyways. I can't zoom in, unfortunately, but you can see the property outlined in red, and if you look at the existing paved area, you can see the green trees. If you visited the site, they have significant, I guess, landscaping kind of surrounding the fencing already. It's pretty tall. You can't really see outside of the parking lot. So I guess that would be an option if there is a desire to see additional parking on site, if there is a real concern and issue with parking, to require them to add parking within there, or I think certainly striping some stalls could be an option, if that's something you desire.
Okay, so
We call the applicant.
commission members, go ahead. What?
I'm not hearing from the community that it's a question of expanding the parking as much as they want to ensure that it stays parking. And that with Alan saying, if it's a commercial building, they're always going to have some element of parking space. So even if this gets zoned commercially, they're going to be required to have some element of parking. So nobody could come in there and has employees, could wipe that whole out and make that whole lot a building.
technically.
That, I mean, that's the hypothetical that I hear from the community, is that they want it to stay how it is and feel like that R1 was the way, is the only way to maintain that, because they don't have a level of trust that the city will maintain parking there for any commercial building that takes that spot now or into the future.
Right. Chair and Commission, in the situation right now with the inconsistency with the zoning and the land use, the land is guided for commercial, well, for mixed use, which allows for commercial, retail, higher density housing. Certainly, down the road, something else could occur on this property. So unless the property were divided, and a portion of it was, kept to be, it was its own subject property that had that zoning designation for single low density, single dwelling. Right now, like if they, again, I don't like to talk in hypotheticals, but yes, if they sold it or if they wanted to expand their building, they could. It would, procedurally, that's why we're here, it would require rezoning that western portion of the property, but the land use is guided differently, and that is the, what's the right way to say it, but
It
that.
would trump the other guidance at this
It
time.
trumps it,
Yeah.
so to speak. That is the designation for that property in its entirety, not just for the eastern property or the eastern portion where a building is located. That's the whole property has that designation.
Yes.
So the rezoning is meeting that intent of the land use guidance. And it's complying with our comprehensive plan.
Right.
If they're, if this owner or a different owner decided they didn't want to operate on this site and they wanted to request to have it all zoned residential, they would have to amend the comprehensive plan for a lower density residential designation.
And that is the tools that the city and the planning commission has, the CUP. For every change to that land or anything, have to be guided under the CUP. That is where we are, here or in the future.
And I guess the appropriate time of when this could have been brought up as far as the future land use would have been when it was initially guided for service commercial, or I forget what it was called at that time. It's been amended and changed since then. And so at this point, we have what we have. And so.
What John is saying is definitely the correct situation. There's no question about it, that they don't want another building there. But at the same time, I also heard at least 2 visitors here who said they're parking on the road, customers are blocking their driveways and stuff like that. And I think there is another tool for you folks as well, that if it's a no parking zone or they're blocking your driveway, you should be able to call the city and say, hey, this is happening and need to be taken care of, type situation. Because that's your personal property and for your personal enjoyment. It's not for a person to come and block you off. So that's an option that you folks have in your possession to be able to exercise it. So, having said that, any more questions, comments, anything on this particular subject? If not, is there a desire to make a motion on this request? And is there any interest in adding the parking aspect to be studied and qualified for this motion?
I would like to see us do something with the parking, so I would suggest that we include that in our conditional use permit approval.
Okay.
So if we could go back.
Motion to approve. You want me to make the motion?
Yeah, go ahead and make a
Yeah,
motion.
motion to approve a conditional use permit amendment resolution for the property at 831 Century Avenue North, subject to certain conditions of approval, including parking.
Say a parking
Including-
assessment?
Huh?
Parking
It is-
assessment?
Parking assessment. All of it, yeah.
And there's a second one.
All right, there's a second one anyway. Yeah, motion to approve an ordinance, yeah, amending the city's zoning map to rezone the west portion of the property at 831 Century Avenue North from R1 single dwelling residential to business commercial.
Is there a second?
Second.
Lou seconds it. All those in favor of approving the snake discovery recommendation? Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nay.
Nay. So 3 ayes, 4 ayes, 1 nay. John,
There should be two motions.
I feel, I feel like the legal issues that have been with this property in the past maybe have not been identified as clearly as possible with the city attorney based on the testimony from the client. I get very worried when they have Supreme Court documents that the city doesn't misstep, and I think it should be maybe tabled, that this goes forward to the city council until that's been what the documents that the homeowner has been reviewed, and make sure all the documents that the city attorney has looked at are also the documents that the homeowner has.
When I think, for point of order too, there's two motions before us. So what we should be doing is doing one first, vote on that, and then the second one, and vote on that.
is that what's necessity, Elizabeth?
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think there was there is two motions. I would prefer if you did those separately, because I wasn't sure if there was a second on that first motion.
Yep,
I
that is
didn't
two.
see- Okay.
Okay, so
How about we
what's the
start
pleasure?
over?
You want to start all over again?
Let's start over, and then let's
Okay.
go with a motion to approve a conditional use permit amendment resolution for the property at 831 Century Avenue North, contingent upon a parking
Assessment.
assessment, and subject to certain conditions of approval as staff has outlined.
Okay. All right, we'll go with what Fred has said. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, John seconds. All those in favor of approving it, say aye. John, you are aye too?
Aye.
Okay, so we have all ayes. Is there a second motion?
The second motion is to approve an ordinance amending the city's zoning map to rezone the west portion of the property at 831 Century Avenue North from R1 Single Dwelling Residential to BC Business Commercial.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Lou has seconded. All those in favor of approving this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No? Okay, so,
No.
no?
No.
No.
And the reason is that what John has said.
Okay, let me finish
Oh,
the
finish,
count.
yeah.
So,
we
we
just-
have one aye,
Yeah.
and I'm an aye, so 2 ayes and 3 noes, so the motion failed.
Can we do a roll call?
Sure.
Just so, okay, thank you. So, Lou?
So
Yang,
Lou,
aye.
Lou Yang is aye,
Fred Dom, no?
Tushar Desai, yay.
All right, no.
John Eads, no?
Okay, so the motion failed. So you have the answers to move forward to the city council. When is it going to the city council?
This is scheduled to be reviewed by the city council on October 9th, Monday, October 9th.
So for those of you who are here, just so you know, it's going to the city council for discussions and approvals at the city council level on October 9th. No.
That is at 7 PM, and it's here in the city council chambers. And if you have any further questions, you can let me know or send those to me.
And the Maplewood City page, the website, also has the agenda on the website, so you can also look at that.
That is correct. You can follow along with a project on the website that was linked on the public hearing notice. There's a web page for this. Certainly, October 9th, Monday at 7 PM.
Okay? All right, so that ends the public hearings today. There are no new businesses, unfinished business, development code updates. Staff?
All right. Yes, so tonight we have the pleasure of some of our consulting staff from HKGI here.
Oh, man.
We'll be going through some code updates. A lot of this is things that we've already talked about, or actually all of it is really. So it's really just an update. So without further ado, here is Rita for you.
I'm not scared.
I made your packet long.
Yeah, it's long.
See? That was worth it. You didn't have enough to
We've
read.
been looking forward to it for a long time.
Yeah.
I know, it's been a while. So, happy to be here again. Again, I'm Rita Trapp with HKGI. I did want to introduce Kendra. She is a staff member that has joined us in May, and so she's been helping staff and myself work through this. So she's going to present a little bit this evening as well, because she's been digging in on getting the code updates moving for us. So, as we stated in the packet, our agenda includes this evening kind of a recap on signage and mural, really just focusing on elements yourselves, the Community Design Review Board, or the City Council mentioned. As you know, the last time we saw you, we kind of did a joint meeting with the Community Design Review Board. After we saw the two of you, then we went to the City Council at a work session and got their feedback. And so the revisions this evening are mostly related to responding to that. We did also take a look at the mixed-use district specifically, and so I just wanted to highlight kind of what we did, make sure if there was anything that you wanted us to look at, that we would take a look at that. Then we'll cover nonconformities really at a high level. That's a very technical section. We're more worried and concerned that the city attorney reviews it and makes sure they're happy because it is so technical and it's reliant on state statute. So we had some suggestions just to make it easier to use. And then I'll cover next steps. So we had 6 topics about signage and mural regulations. And so Kendra is going to start and talk about some of the changes we made in that area. And as you know from the packet, there is one area we wanted to have some discussion with you about illumination. And then I'll join you back up to talk about digital displays and some of those other elements. So I'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Chair, Planning Commission, thank you so much for having me. It's great to meet you all. So as Rita mentioned, we did dig into the signage and mural regulations again, and we clarified in the general regulations that signs placed near the corner and 2 intersecting streets shall comply with clear sight triangle regulations. And specifically to freestanding sign placement, we added that signs shall not block or obstruct driveways. So we specifically also looked at illumination, and we did retain the outdoor lighting requirements, but then we also identified illumination in the mixed-use district. So this provision we wanted to clarify with you on the intent. If you can see in red, we highlighted in the text the red and blue. So we understand that neon lighting and LED lighting that has appearance of exposed neon lighting is allowed, but internally illuminated signs are prohibited. So we wanted to have a further discussion with you on what the intent was. So we compiled some examples of types of internally illuminated signs to get your feedback on if you still intend to want to prohibit internally illuminated signs, or if you want to allow either some of them or all of them in the mixed-use district, or even in the North End district, or even more broadly. So I'll turn it back to you, Chair, Commission.
Okay.
You want our input now?
Yes,
Sure.
comments,
So-
questions or comments?
Okay.
So I'm confused, because the statement said that they could look like neon lights, but they couldn't be neon, but they can't be neon lights?
Yes, that is correct. So that's what we are trying to understand.
Yeah.
The language is a bit confusing.
Yeah.
So that is why we are presenting this to you tonight, to understand what the intent is. If you'd like us to provide some recommendations for the language, or, we can talk about the type of lighting you want in the mixed-use district.
So really here, I'm at least interpreting the words in red is that LED lighting is pretending to be neon lighting. And so they're saying if you had LED lighting that looked like neon lighting, it's okay. That's how I'm interpreting it. And so to me, if it's neon, whether it is being used by LED form or some other form, to me, it's one and the same. It's serving the same purpose, getting the same output, same results out of the situation.
Okay. And yeah, I believe we do understand that too, what you're saying. I think it's the internally illuminated signs that are prohibited that we also want further clarification if that is still the intent.
Go back to those pictures.
Do these get
Sign
reviewed?
open is a kind of internal or external.
This is all internally illuminated.
These are all internal?
Yeah.
All internally. So there is some captions underneath all of them. I can go through them. So the red, I don't know, does this have a?
Yeah, it does.
How does this work? I don't know. Oh, okay. So the red brick pizza, that's internally illuminated. So that is, the sign is like the sign, and then the lighting is on the back. So the internally illuminated LED sign, which is the open sign, that's the exposed neon, which is what we're understanding that is allowed. Dollar Tree is internally illuminated letter sign, so all the letters are internally illuminated, not just the
There's a bulb
sign, like
inside
red
of
brick
it.
pizza. The Hertz is illuminated, internally illuminated box, so that is the sign. And then Morning is an internally illuminated backlit cutout sign. So it's similar to red brick pizza, but the whole sign is one light,
Yeah, but
essentially.
with Morning, that is open, meaning it's a hole through which the light is coming.
Correct.
Whereas with red brick, it's a solid red brick pizza and the light is behind it and it's kind of illuminating from the surrounding parts of the letters. But I am just as confused because internally illuminated LED sign, to me, when it says internally, it is basically saying, okay, the mechanism is inside each one of the letters and that oblong shape to fire it up and give you the light. And then at the same time, if you see that and you see the box sign or the letter sign for Dollar Tree, principle is the same.
Essentially, yeah.
So I would, in my interpretation is, I would accept all of them. I won't say, oh, you can't do one versus the other. To me, it's just a different mechanism of bringing out the light here.
Okay.
Do we know if any of this gets reviewed, like with the CDRB? And they're trying to keep consistent with signage for all businesses throughout all of Maplewood, and if they want some consistency? Or is it just kind of whatever the tenant or the property owner wants?
This was reviewed to some extent, right, with our CDRB. I mean, we
Yeah.
went through this when we did that joint session, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know why this specific standard is in place only in the mixed-use district. I can't speak to that. But it is unique to only in this mixed-use district where it has this language.
Is it because it's residential and, potentially residential and business?
I don't
And that's
know.
trying to decrease and just to decrease the amount of lighting, that the lighting is always going towards the building versus the lighting is coming at you, even if it's internal?
That's maybe a fair assumption, but it still is a little confusing then how it says that neon lighting is allowed. And so I think that's what we're getting at is what do you guys want? Because
all-
ultimately,
I think it's all fine.
you will make the recommendation to the city council.
Okay, but so is,
And so that is
Right.
why she has, provided these images so that you could see what they look like and kind of describe
Right.
the differences and how they
right.
are.
They look good.
I just still want to just revisit Lou's comment. Is CDRB having any part in this? Yeah, we had the joint session, but now you are here. Are you having the same session with CDRB, or we are the ones who have to make that decision?
Right, the only other comment, which I probably shouldn't stand back here and do just. The only other comment I would make is that many of the projects, as you know, end up having to have a comprehensive sign plan, so at that time that they would probably review it. But it is something that in advance of the final decision, certainly if you have a meeting before, they could weigh in on that, because that's
Okay.
a slight change.
Okay.
But I think we flagged it because we didn't understand it, and it seemed, I think we struggled with the neon. Like, we can handle not allowing internally illuminated signs if you don't allow the neon, but when you allow the neon, then it gets confusing
Yeah.
for us, so. if-
And the only other comment I have about the exposed neon or the open sign is, as John was mentioning, is that going to throw more light, like in a mixed-use district, you've got an open sign on the first floor in front of a door, for example, but then there is a apartment right above that first floor, and that's likely the scenario we are looking at in that North Maplewood area. Now, is that light going to disturb the occupant of that apartment who has a window right above it? So that's the part that I would struggle with when it comes to this illumination and how it is going to be applied in the mixed-use district, because you've got residential above a business. Business wants a light, but the resident says, hey, I want my room to be dark when I go to sleep, and goes home at 10 and wants to sleep, and the business is still running. Pizzas are being delivered. So that's the part that I think we are going to have to come to kind of grips with to decide how do we want to have this in mixed use where the residents are not getting exposed to the lighting. So is there something like you put a cover on the top so the light doesn't go above? Like that lighting gentleman was saying, we can expose the light to diffuse downwards and not up. Maybe that could solve the problem, but not a lighting expert. I'm just bringing it as a concern that's the part that I would be most concerned about here.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is maybe add additional conditions or provisions regarding internally illuminated lights, so that it does not disturb
Well,
other buildings.
Not just internally, Kendra. I see red brick having that orange on the glow on the top. That orange glow is going to go up as well, the way it is sitting, because the glow is all the way around. Dollar Tree, I can't tell if they are covered up on the top so that the light is not going up or not. Hertz, it looks like it'll go up, and Morning definitely is going up. So that's the part. It's the design combination with where it's getting illuminated. It's not really, be it LED or a neon or what it's supposed to be made of. It's where is it throwing its light. That's the part that I would have a concern about in a mixed-use district.
Understood, and I think staff can speak to this as well. They review the sign permits, so maybe that could be
sure.
something.
So within this context, have you done any safety assessment with some of these signs?
Safety assessment, is that what you said? So in regards to safety, are you referring to the light shining on?
No, in terms of if a dollar store is internal in the mixed-use area, does it blow up?
We haven't done any assessment on the candle
Okay.
foots. I guess that is something that we could
Yeah,
explore
we're
further.
talking
if
about
that's-
internal, external. There is different, candle lights that is involved over here. Some of them in the winter will emit heat. And when you close door versus when you open door in the fall and all that stuff, you know. Those of them that are in boxes, we heat up, that thing can melt. Who knows, man? I don't know.
I'm hoping that they've got ventilation to cover some of the heat portion, but
Yeah.
that would be the lighting expert's responsibility, I would hope. But at the same time, like that open sign, again, it's an open sign, and for safety reasons, as Al says, what if somebody is gonna throw something at
Yeah,
it and break up and blow all over the place, so.
And it's internet.
Well,
I think these look good.
Okay, yeah, the
Looks
current,
wise, they look
I can go
good,
back
but-
to what it says right now. You can keep it as it is, keep the exposed neon and LED, and then prohibit internally illuminated signs, or we can revise it in a way that makes.
Yeah, I would walk away from the internally illuminated signs are prohibited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we see those examples, they seem to be okay.
Yeah.
And Chair and Commission, as mentioned, we review these as well as, with mixed-use districts, they do require a comprehensive sign plan. So if there was a new project coming in with an apartment on the floor above, they would be looking at those things, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we
Okay.
just want a little I just want a little clarification when we get sign permits, what that means and what you want it to mean, I
So
guess.
is
so.
the recommendation then to remove like the neon and the LED specifics and just keep it a little more vague so that there's all the different options are available, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a
Yep,
good
that would be more
approach.
reasonable, makes a good point there.
So to confirm, you're talking about essentially removing those last two sentences
Yeah, all the
that are
specifics.
confusing.
Yeah, the red and the blue,
Yeah.
because I don't think there should be any prohibition there either.
So remove specifics and make a general statement
Yes.
about illumination.
Yeah.
I was hearing some concerns about brightness
Yep.
and stuff, so maybe we can incorporate that into.
Safety.
Yeah, if mixed-use design aspect, like Elizabeth is already saying that there are some regulations that you folks follow, right?
Well, and I also just don't want to confirm too, because this first slide here is showing what this first paragraph says is allowed. And then those other slides are showing
What is, only one's
what's
allowed.
technically
I guess I forgot to mention that, so.
not allowed. And you're
Excuse
saying
me.
that you're okay with them, so we would be okay with internally illuminated signs as well.
Yes, we
So
would
then,
be.
I guess, we can rework that paragraph to, allow for external or internal, I guess, illuminated signs. We got it, okay.
Okay.
I got it. I had
Okay.
had to think,
I think you might just put a limit on the side.
okay,
Because you're really wanting to put it open and not.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
if it's a mixed use, and if we're talking about the north end, is there an intention for there to be uniformity in the signs for, that this is a district? Just like Maplewood has uniformity in their signs, their
That's
lighting
what that-
signs in
Is that
some
true?
neighborhoods? I think that's the problem we're having is, we're not really sure what the goal is. Is it to keep people not awake at night, or is it to be consistent in regards to, if we're trying to develop this as a district, that everybody has the same sign and the same type of lighting to their signs? And you don't have the strip mall look.
Right, that's what I would,
Everybody having a different size sign.
that's what the bottom two are. I would have said, if we just said the first paragraph and not the red and the blue, I would have agreed with you. When you add the red and the blue, then it gets fuzzy.
Yeah, it does.
So maybe the original intention was what you talked about, and somewhere along the way, the red and the blue came up. And because that, to me, muddied the water. Otherwise, I would say if you're kind of going for a very similar look with the external light source. So that's,
Just like if you're designing a neighborhood, or
Yeah.
you're
That's why it's-
some consistency in, as long
Correct.
as they have homeowners associations.
and that's why we wanted to have the conversation is, there is a difference in the look of the two on the bottom left, the two on the bottom, versus the other ones in terms of aesthetics. So are we trying to make the north end or mixed use different than the rest of the commercial areas? If so, then we may want to keep with the aesthetic that's talked about, If not, the exposed neon still seems odd. And maybe that just needs to be limited, so it's just an open sign as opposed to like a sign. That could be an approach that helps it a little bit.
So the blue and red gone.
What?
The blue and red will be gone.
Yes, if you don't want it.
No, we don't want it.
You guys, so we like just having the external.
Yes.
So only the other slide, only that type of signage is what you want to see, right?
Yeah, you can do the two, if you go to the other one, you can do the morning and the red brick pizza still with the
Yeah.
other paragraph.
Right.
Yeah.
You just can't, you would lose the neon in the other two.
Okay.
Yep,
So if that works.
Yep.
okay,
This is Maplewood.
yeah.
But Elizabeth, just to clarify, there will be standards set for each of those districts for signage guidelines and things like that.
So currently, we have specific standards for each district in the city right now. This is
Good.
specific to the mixed-use district.
Okay, good.
We don't, in the, to be honest, we don't get this detailed in the other commercial zoning districts as far as the type of lighting.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you for your feedback. All right, so moving on to temporary construction signs. We did look at some precedents in other cities, and we recognize that properties with open building permits should be allowed more than one temporary construction sign, and therefore we allowed that and set up some standards for that signage. So that was the other thing. So I will turn it back now to Rita. Thank you so much.
okay, thank you.
All right. Dynamic displays. There's a couple things we did here. The dynamic display ordinance had a few different provisions. As a step back to just remind you about why we even dug into signage in the first place, is that there was a Supreme Court case in 2015 that stated that we couldn't have content-based regulations. So we can't have any regulations that base what you are allowed to do based on if you read the sign. So what that meant is dynamic displays used to have two different kind of sections. So there was a dynamic display that did time, temperature, kind of the bank. That's what I always think of, the bank ones, time, temperature. And then there was ones that were the dynamic displays where there was a message. And there used to be rules for two different ones. We can't do that anymore because you'd have to read them to understand. In doing that, we kind of combined regulations together from two different places within the dynamic signs. One area is that frequency of digital display. When it was time and temperature, it used to say that you would have that up for 2 minutes at a time, which is great, and that makes sense. But if you're going to have a message being up for 2 minutes would drive us all insane. And so we needed to shorten that to a more reasonable time frame. So we did some research with surrounding communities. The numbers are all over the place, I'll be honest. We landed on recommending 15 seconds. If you would like, we could stand here and figure out what 15 seconds is, just so you can see. But it seems like if you're sitting at a stoplight, 15 seconds is pretty good before it changes. And then we have the additional conditions that we listed that are all in the same place. So for example, you can't have a message that starts on one and then it changes and you have to finish reading it in order to understand the message, because then people aren't going to be paying attention. And so we do have those things to kind of prevent issues. And then there's only one dynamic display allowed on each sign, no audio, and then they have to have an automatic dimmer. So those were provisions that existed in other parts of the dynamic displays, and we've moved them so everybody, no matter what kind of dynamic display, they're going to have to follow those regulations because they seemed appropriate for all. Any questions about that? Does that make sense on the why?
And I'm just wondering, the 15 seconds or less and all that stuff, is that age compatible or?
I told you, did you want to stop here for 15 seconds and think about whether you could read something? I mean, I'm happy, we can look at other numbers, they really did range. I think 8 seconds, I feel like we saw an 8 seconds all the way up to 30 seconds or 45.
For certain age?
Yeah, 30 is for seniors.
So,
Wow.
so we just picked 15.
Okay.
If you don't,
That works.
okay. Any other questions on this one? We just had one more follow-up on dynamic displays. We did, previously in the code, there weren't regulations specifically for mixed use and North End. It just got missed when those things happen. And so we do have standards set in place. They are required to have a comprehensive sign plan approval, so any dynamic display in those districts, which seems kind of important given the mixed use character of those districts. And then they're only permitted on monument signs. That is not the case in all districts, but in the mixed use in North End, that's where they're allowed. So you can't have it on the side of a building, that kind of idea. And then there's obviously some requirements about setback and when you can be illuminated, again, to try and, it makes sense to allow them in a commercial district, but try and reduce the impact that they may have on surrounding properties. So those are the recommended. And these standards did already exist in your code. It was just we took them from someplace else. I believe they were from the public and institutional signs and moved them into here so that they made sense.
So you got the comment about 20 feet for residential use?
Yes, and that's only if it's like residentially zoned on the next, not residential within the mixed use district.
Okay.
And I think this is a summary, but I will go back and check it. I think it's actually, we didn't write the whole verbiage, and I think it is worded correctly in the actual regulations, but we will double check that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Looks
All right. Murals. Murals, there was a discussion when we met with you about prohibiting murals in residential areas. And there was some discussion and back and forth between staff and us and whether we should do that or not. And ultimately, it was decided, it was recommended that we'd like you to consider allowing them to be, not to be restricted by district, but to specifically, all of them are going to have a comprehensive mural plan, which is going to be reviewed by the Community Design Review Board, which should keep the character of the murals appropriate. And the thought and concern was, you know, the idea of someone doing something on the side of their residential garage, probably depending on what they're going to do, is not that bad. Like if someone wanted to put a pastoral scene or they wanted to do something. And so rather than restricting it by district, the idea is, since they have to have a comprehensive mural plan, that probably restricts it because most people aren't going to want to go through the effort of preparing all the materials in advance, submitting an application, going in front of the Community Design Review Board. Like just even that effort will kind of keep it to folks that are fairly serious, artistic, and are kind of in the spirit of what you're looking for. That's staff's recommendation, but obviously you had a different discussion the last time I was here. So we didn't want to make that change without calling that forth and making sure you were comfortable with that.
Any comments from you? I hear what you're saying, and the hoops that you have to go through to get an approval will likely deter some of the applicants, but
I think it's just very straightforward. If you say no residential, and then if somebody has a compelling case, then they need to bring it here versus just this. I just think keeping it out of the R1 makes sense.
Yeah.
You could potentially have some real garage issues.
yeah. So I hear that, but I'm with John here that I still kind of feel that
Okay.
residential, you're gonna create some fisticuffs between neighbors for some drawing that's put up on a garage
Okay.
door or the side of a garage. I'm more concerned about some artistic person wants to take the whole wall of their house on the side or something and draw something up and say, hey, that's me, but the neighbor may not like it, so.
Okay. And is it just the R1 districts in all their iterations, or are there more than just the R1 districts?
I'd say it should be
I'd say
anywhere
just
residences are.
I think you should start with R1 district.
All right, now we said two different things.
I'm saying R1 as well as
R2,
R2,
R3, anything where residential.
Yep, where there are residents,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. All right. Now there's one more. Signage is one of those things, doesn't it? It just never goes away. Poor Elizabeth, just remember that. So when we were going through and making the updates, it was also identified that there's a little bit of inconsistency in the code about window signs. Currently, window signs are only allowed in the mixed use and North End districts. And that text I have underneath, a permanent window sign shall be applied directly to the window or hung inside the window, but cannot be painted directly onto the window. A window sign shall not cover more than 1/3 of the window or door in which the sign is placed. That's what the code says. So I think the biggest thing that staff would like is clarification. So if someone calls in any of the other districts, the code is actually silent about window signs. It doesn't say if it's allowed, it's not allowed. Technically, you could make the argument that it's not allowed because it's not talked about, but that's confusing. So we wanted to have the conversation about should this be applied more broadly? Is it just a pedestrian or a mixed-use kind of district thing? And are there limitations? Do you like the wording? I gave you just some examples, bad and good. I intentionally picked some ones that I was like, well, let's be real. The code isn't really specific. So you could, nowadays I would guess most people would do window decals. I mean, the things have been kind of reasonable. However, technically you could do a sign that's just a piece of cardboard that's placed up against the window, and that could be a window sign. So I'm not saying you have to be more specific. I just wanted to give you a variety of examples. Obviously, the buddies doesn't fit your code. That's more than 1/3 of the window. That's covering every inch of the window. So we're not aiming for that. But again, it gives you a good illustration of different ways that people have done it. In the top right, that's just kind of a sign. That one's probably closer to 1/3. I didn't measure, obviously. So I guess the biggest question is the fundamental, does this provision make sense in other districts that people can have window signs, or do we not want to allow window signs? Because that's where the most clarification is being sought. If you don't like what is written, we can also talk about that. That's open for discussion too.
Again, I'll speak up. Window signs in all areas is not the way to go.
Right, I agree.
Because I'll give a quick example. We fairly regularly get requests for having home hair care services where somebody's working out of their house. Pretty soon you could let them have a sign in their window saying Lisa's hair design.
I think
No,
your home
that's
occupation doesn't
R1.
allow any signage, right?
No, we technically allow signage in residential districts. It's just limited to a certain.
But
2 square feet
is
or
it
4
in the
square?
windows?
Small, I can pull it up.
It's like 2 or 4 square, I mean, it's pretty small.
We allow wall or freestanding signs.
So, not disagreeing, we need to address that.
Right.
So, I totally agree. If you are going to address it more broadly, we need to make sure to cover home occupations. I
Correct.
totally agree with that statement. I'm
Okay.
just trying to figure out what the rules actually are at the moment. And I
This
suppose I
is-
could look it up.
Yeah, this is mixed use in North
Okay.
End.
But for generality, she's also looking for that input.
Yeah, and it can be you want to prohibit it. We have no problem. It's just, then we want to say it so that when people call, Elizabeth can say in section whatever, it prohibits window signs, just to make life easier.
So Chair and Commission, I can confirm, we do allow a professional occupation sign. You were correct, 2 square feet. Good job, Rita, for a permitted home occupation. And that's without a sign permit. So that we allow also wall signs up to 24 square feet for a resident or a multiple unit development, and all non-residential uses that are within that district. The wall of the building or the overhanging canopy or awning. We also allow a monument sign up to 32 square feet.
But that's not all for home occupations, right?
Right, no, that's not all for home, I'm just saying.
No,
so
that's fine. I just want to make sure we knew that
Yeah,
it's
so
not
to
all for home
clarify, the
occupations.
home occupation is
Just the 2 square
limited.
feet.
So when you have a residential home or somebody who has they cut hair or whatever it may be, yes, that is limited in size. But we do allow these other types of signage, which, depending upon the type of use on that property, it could be an apartment or a duplex or whatever. Yeah, or it could be something else.
Okay,
I don't think this fits the North End, does it?
fix what?
I don't think it fits in the North End.
You don't think the window signs do?
Yeah, do you? I don't know.
At least the big ones, I'm not at all in favor of, but I'm a little even perplexed about the Thai takeaway sign.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering what part of that green part is part of the sign versus the name Thai takeaway. So,
Well, we could be specific if you, that would be part of the clarification we could add, that it's any part that, because the color is clearly communicating their brand. So that would be something if you wanted to move forward and be more clear, we could be clear that it's not just around the letters, it's anything that is evoking the brand. Anything that's not a part of the window that you're applying is part of a window sign. But I'm not advocating, I'm just,
Yeah.
we can address those things as you have those kinds of things.
but then what if the Thai takeaway is not there, but somebody's just got the green strip there? Is that still classified as a sign?
It is if you decide it is.
I would say so.
Well, because I can define it however we want to define it. So anything you apply to a window is a window sign.
Sign.
Doesn't matter if it has words or color or whatever. We could, and then we probably would want to give some, illustrations like we did with the dynamic displays where it's generic and it's like this applies, this is, like these are all window signs.
Yeah, but this, like this green is blind, and I suspect it's plastic. What about if you etch the glass? You can etch the glass to refract lights and all that stuff, you know what I'm saying?
I totally get you.
Yeah.
I would say that we wouldn't allow that, but it doesn't specifically say that. We said you can't paint, so I don't think you can etch. But we'll say that now that you said it.
You can sketch but not etch.
Yeah, sketch your edge.
Yeah.
Okay, I wrote it down, no etching.
Yep, no edging.
That's the intent, though, I think, from this, is like you want it to be a decal or something kind of put together and thoughtful, not overwhelming. That's what I got out of what was written.
Other municipalities allow this?
That is a really good question. Yes, it feels like I see it a lot of
Yeah, I know.
places.
Yeah, I'd say it's okay. I don't
Now,
know.
you originally questioned if it was allowed, it should be allowed in the north end. Are you?
Well, I didn't know. I mean, I guess the north end depends on the, I don't know enough about it, I guess.
None of us do. There hasn't been a project there yet.
It's been going on for so long.
I know, but I
Well,
mean, I
less
don't
than
know,
mixed
you know,
use, though.
like
What's
it's,
going in?
yeah, is it gonna be like strip malls in the north end?
Oh, I hope not. That's not our hope.
And
No, the forms doesn't
Yeah.
indicate.
I mean,
So
my
then-
hope is it feels more like the character of mixed use. It's just the difference between the two is that mixed north end is trying to create a neighborhood. So we're gonna have new streets, and so the rules couldn't be applied from the mixed use district because we needed to make rules about how far apart streets could be and about how they had to have sidewalks and how they would have public connection, the things that the mixed use are like little corners of places or Gladstone. So that's the main difference between the two for me, but it might be different for you. That's just kind of how I've understood it over the years. It's just, we're starting from a mall parking lot and trying to create a neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah, so my perspective is that having some signage is important, because even me as a consumer, if I'm driving by, I'm looking for something to tell me that this place that I want to go to exists somewhere here. So some kind of a signage is always beneficial,
Right.
but I'm not at all favor of buddies, or sometimes even this orange juice and Lisa's are kind of overpowering to me.
Yep.
They have got too much there going on, but,
Yes.
Thai takeaway, yeah, it's presentable. I like that approach, or that one above,
Okay.
with that coffee sign.
So
Okay.
that one
So
third.
I think
Yeah.
one comment I didn't make
Yeah.
is I believe, and I think we'll stick with it, is that this is part of your overall, so say you have a wall sign allowance, this is like an element you can do, so if you do this, then you don't do others.
Others.
So it's
Yep.
not like additive that we're adding,
Right.
right? Okay.
That's, yeah, because it doesn't really say you can't do that, but because it doesn't explicitly state that they're not allowed, that has been the interpretation. So if somebody were to ask or submit sign permits for a new business, and some of them, some of the renderings showed window signage in addition to a wall signage, we would factor that into their overall, what's allowed for their wall signage currently.
Yep. So I
Okay.
think with the idea of a third of the window makes sense.
Okay, so if I can clarify, no etching? Clarify
etching.
that even any color of a brand is part of a window sign, so we need to make that
Correct.
change.
Yep.
And then it makes sense in the north end, got that. More broadly in other commercial districts, do we think this is okay, or do you
I
feel like
think
it
so.
just doesn't?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think that
I think this is fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, and then home occupations, we'll make sure that that's clear.
yeah, that would be. a
Because you don't
key one.
really, window decals in a residential area just doesn't
Right.
feel the
Or
same.
daycare folks putting up big signs.
Right, okay. Any other elements, or did we summarize that? All right, we'll move off signage. We're all ready. All right, the mixed-use district, it applies to a few areas of the community. Obviously, you had a discussion earlier this evening about an area in the community where it applies. Gladstone is really the area that's seen the development occur, so I think those have happened recently enough that I think all of you, most of you, have seen an actual development project in Gladstone and are fairly familiar with that. Staff asked us to review the regulations because they haven't been reviewed for a very long time. And so we reviewed them, talked it through with staff. Generally, we didn't feel like there was anything that was so different or so didn't seem appropriate. I looked a little bit, thought about the north end. We talked about that with staff. It felt like it was generally working, so that's one of our tests with you. We did reorganize it and reformat it, hopefully to make it easier to follow. That's the goal. So you'll see in what we sent out in the draft that it's the regulations with some changes. We also had to make some changes because the uses that were originally described aren't reflective of the use table we worked with you on. So things like adding duplex, clarifying row house, townhouse, those types of things. So a lot of the language changes weren't significant. They were just trying to make everything consistent. We did add provisions for shared parking because that section was a little bit confusing. So we tried to improve that and clarify, you can have shared parking. The idea is that the uses that share the parking are not having their highest use at the same time, that there's some type of easement that's recorded so that in perpetuity you can account for the shared parking and someone can't develop and then with a different use and then that's in conflict. So those provisions are in there. So kind of the ask this evening is, if you had a chance to review them, did you see anything that was of concern or questions for the mixed-use district? Because those are generally what we're going to move forward with. The use table-wise, generally it follows what we had discussed previously. We just kind of tried to summarize it for you so you could see what was allowed and what wasn't allowed.
I don't see
Any-
any shields. You
Anything
guys-
that you flagged at all?
No.
Okay. I hope not. I really didn't change that much, but you never know.
Yeah.
This was your chance to think about it and bring up new ones
All right.
that you hadn't thought of. All right, so nonconformities. Just a summary, nonconformity means any lot building or use of land or use of a building which existed at the time new regulations were put into place but don't follow those new regulations. I know you're fairly familiar with the concept. We had flagged it when we were working on the mixed-use district. There was a reference back to the nonconformity section, which is the first time I had read the nonconformity section, and then I got confused. So then I asked staff, and then staff gave me permission to go in and try and make it a little easier to follow. And so we have reformatted it. We usually, when we do code updates, we like to put all the regulations for nonconforming uses together, and then non-conforming lots together, and then non-conforming buildings and structures, because otherwise when you put all those words together, then I get confused. And so that's what we've done. City staff has shared it with the attorney, as I referenced at the beginning, because really it's based on state statute, so the city is limited in what it's allowed to do and what it isn't allowed to do. So they're reviewing it and will flag. There's two sections that I had flagged as, I think these can go away. They're actually kind of confusing, but we're going to have the city attorney weigh in and make sure that I'm correct, that they can go away. And so with that, if there was questions I can answer on that section, again, that one is, that one's a little bit different because the nonconformities are referenced in a few different places of the code. And so we identified a change to the definition, a change that needed to occur for the main section where nonconformities is, And then we also identified a change of additional design standard. There was a grandfathering of non-conforming luminaries, which we don't have the date, but if you notice just above there, it talks about it has dates and it kind of tells you when the code was adopted. And so we looked at that and it was really a long time ago. And so our thought is that any non-conforming luminaries probably have burned out and have been replaced. And so we probably don't need this section anymore because it's a little confusing. So our recommendation was to pull it because probably luminaries that old, for efficiency purposes or other purposes, probably should be updated at this point. So, any questions on the nonconformities? I know that section is always a little, well, maybe you understood it. We always have to read it a few times.
It's almost like a little too much legalese.
It is too much legalese. Yes, but it's very important. So we want to get it right, which is why it got sent to the city attorney specifically. Any questions? Okay. Really? No technical
That's it?
questions? No, well, I have next steps.
Oh, okay.
I mean, unless you
So
don't want that.
this doesn't address how nonconformities are reported or how the city addresses the nonconformities?
Meaning if someone has a nonconformity,
Yeah, I
what
mean,
someone
how-
can do
you
with
know.
them? Or what do you mean by reporting?
Well, like, how does the city know about nonconformity properties? Is that just basically people call in complaining that there's a property that's nonconforming? I mean, there's not necessarily there's not a nonconformity officer for the city of Maplewood.
So a nonconformity is a situation where the rules of the property don't match the rules of the code. Generally, those are found out when someone is proposing to do something or there is a complaint, like you said. And then city staff has to research back to the property, either when was the structure built, was there a permit pulled, is it a recent thing? You can look at aerial photography. It's kind of like a research dig if you need to. Generally, you can use a combination of things when you have to address a nonconformity. And with you, I'm sure there are plenty, just because you've been around for a long time.
There's just an element that, you see a lot of nonconformities as you drive down the road. So it's like until they get to a certain level.
Correct.
They are usually not.
Yes, I believe you are complaints-based, correct, in enforcement?
Right.
Yes.
We don't generally get complaints about like a non-conforming use so much though. I mean,
Right.
like she said, that's usually like, somebody going into a building that's been there already and it's a new use or something like that. That's where those discussions usually happen.
All right.
Okay.
Next steps. So our goal, right now, we're aiming to, our hope is to finish by the end of the year. As I love seeing you, but we've been together for a number of years now on this, and it would be nice to get some code provisions in place because we have a lot to come together. Because we have all of 2022 and 2023. So we need to prepare draft ordinances. So Article 1, we're going to selectively repeal and replace nonconformities and off-street parking. Article 2, we're just going to completely wipe the whole thing out as it is today and replace it. That includes uses, districts, mixed use, use-specific standards. So mixed use, although I handled it with you today, that's actually a part of that whole article. So the North End District is in there, PUDs, which you saw 2 years ago. So that'll be that entire section. We reformatted it all. That's what I talked to you about in late 2022 is when we went through the use table and all of those elements. And then Article 3 is a complete repeal and replace of the sign regulations. So the goal is to have a public hearing next month on these. Mostly what we have to do is just get all the formatting fixed and make sure everything's done. I think we've gone through the conversation. There's not a lot of new things we talked about tonight that we necessarily, we'll have to make changes, but that we really need to revisit with you at length next time. Tentatively, we're scheduling it for the October meeting. This is not the type of element where we have to notify anybody specifically because it's so broad. So we'll just do a general public hearing notice. And then after you weigh in, then we'll have consideration by the city council when it fits on their agenda. Maybe, most likely in November, but we'll have to see what the availability on the agendas are. That's our hope. Obviously, there's no rhyme or reason that we have to do it that way. It's just nice to finish this up before we go into anything else, because we've certainly spent a lot of time digging in Hopefully, this helps staff in implementation. So I guess the biggest question is, do you feel comfortable with that? The idea that we might hold a public hearing on these things? And obviously, you have the ability, if we come in October and you're not comfortable, you can table it, and then we'll come back in November and have a further conversation. But hopefully,
This is going to be a lot of documentation that you'll be throwing at us. if
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
Correct.
yeah, but you've seen it all before.
That may be so, but still.
Yeah, I'm hearing
I-
you want more time than 3 days before the packet normally gets
That's
sent out.
exactly right.
Am I right?
Right.
That's pretty smart.
You're reading my mind.
Okay,
Dangerous.
very. I agree.
But yep, we definitely would like more time, otherwise parse it into two halves, do one part in October and another in November type thing. It's up to
Okay.
you guys, but we'll definitely need time. Even this time, reading all the stuff that we got on short notice
Yeah,
was a little bit too much.
yeah, and the final will not, because it is a repeal and replace, you won't see all of the track changes, like you haven't seen, just to warn you, well, partly because if you did it, you would close it, and you wouldn't look at it, because it's just so many track changes
Yep,
of
yep.
moving things around.
Yep.
So, we will do our best to send out more in advance to you than a few days. But then I ask if you have questions or concerns that you find before we come to the meeting, it would be great to know about them so that I'm not standing up here trying to
Put your email
go to
in there,
page
so.
25 and figure out. Obviously, you can, but if you do have things that are of concern, it would be great to hear ahead of time, so we're a little more prepared and can work through them if we can.
So just to confirm, are we going to move forward with bringing the whole thing, just try to get it to like maybe the Monday prior? Is that
That's what I'm
we're
hearing.
moving forward with, not necessarily dividing
And
it
if
up
we
into 2 meetings?
Don't finish, then we could,
Right, that's a good point.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's, I would rather just have you have it, and then if we get there and you're like, yeah, not happening, then we know and we can do it, because we can hold over the public hearing, we can, I mean, it depends on our attendance. We can close the public hearing, you can still provide comments and feedback.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable that we could get it out.
We just need to finish the formatting, which, and
So
make the
you're
changes we
saying
heard
a
tonight.
week and 1 day instead of just 1 day, right? You mean
What would-
the Monday before?
That's what she said, I hadn't made any promises.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say the Monday before.
I will try my best to do sooner.
That's 1 day.
That's one day, don't worry.
No, I heard you would like it more, and
Yeah,
we will
we'd
try and
like more.
respect that. We have,
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Right now, we send our packets out Thursday, or sometimes, I guess, it's usually
Yeah,
Thursday.
I was
They're
just
mailed out,
kidding.
Or they're sent out.
So Monday, the week prior would be good.
Right.
we'll try
Yeah.
and,
Yes.
I
Can
will
you give us
try
2
and aim
weeks?
for 2 weekends, which is
Yeah,
what I
2
actually heard.
weekends would be good.
2 weekends would be lovely.
Yep,
I
that
heard
would
that.
be
Yeah.
lovely.
Yes,
Yep,
Yes.
we will do our best.
yep,
But
Lot
thank
of
you
reading.
for all of the great insight.
yep.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for your presentation. All right, so that takes care of unfinished business. We have no commission presentations. Staff presentations, sacred communities and micro-unit dwelling update.
Chair and Commission, really just here to introduce the topic to you tonight. I'm not prepared to, have a in-depth discussion regarding this, but there was a staff report included in your packet outlining some recent legislation that was adopted regarding sacred communities and micro-unit dwellings. At the last session, as part of that, municipalities must allow sacred communities and micro-unit dwellings that conform to the regulations established in that law, and that information was again provided in that packet. In October, the council is planning to have a work session and discuss this item, and so it's possible that they might want to put in place some regulations in our ordinance that match or address what the Minnesota legislature has adopted. So with that, it's really just a request that you review that information, that you are aware of it, because there is a chance that we would bring something to you down the road if the council directs us to do so.
So the regulations have been already ironed out at the state level.
That is correct. So
So-
the state has already put into place some parameters of what is allowed and not allowed. So, and we're going to have the discussion with the council if they want to do anything in addition to that. But there are some also, it does minimize the amount of regulations that cities can have on these types of units. So
Okay.
there's also that at play.
And is this guiding where they would be located?
Yes, so it has, it's basically allowing faith communities to
Got it,
place
okay, yep,
micro units on religious property.
yep.
So in this case, it would be property that's guided or zoned institutional.
Well, churches are oftentimes in a conditional use permit in a residential area even.
Right, so currently the way our ordinance is, we allow a religious facility with a conditional use permit in any zoning district. We have property guided for institutional, but
Got it,
they
okay.
technically could be in any zoning district with a conditional use permit,
Got it, yep,
so.
okay.
Okay, any questions? No?
So it's gonna come back to us then, probably.
I think it's likely that the council
Yeah.
If a
will,
request comes in, is
you know,
likely
look
the
to-
most potential, we'll see something.
you know, the
Yeah.
state has already put in some parameters, so it's hard to say what the council will want to do, if they'll want to just stick with what's already in place, or if they want to do something a little different. We'll see. But
Okay, good,
Okay,
good.
that's it.
Item K,
So,
my favorite.
visitor presentations, we have no visitors to present here, I think. Okay. All right, we shall adjourn at 9:02 p.m. Thank you.